We're towards the end of chapter 10, and this evening we are going to be learning things related to the so-called super Tzadik, which is the Tzadik Gomer, the perfect Tzadik, the person who is the ultimate state of what a human being is meant to achieve. So you have to anticipate that some of the things that we're going to learn this evening are going to go over our heads. It's going to be above our pay grade, because we're talking about somebody who's living in a completely different reality to what we're familiar with. So the things that person does, the way that person relates to Hashem, the focus and motivation for their Judaism is possibly very, very different to what we are used to. And that's a really, we're really going to be stretching ourselves over here this evening to learn the second layer of the secret of the super Tzadik, of the Tzadik Gomer. Remember last week we learned the first layer, which is all about how the Tzadik Gomer is somebody who is B'nai Aliyah. That was the terminology introduced by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who himself was obviously a tzaddik of that caliber. And so Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught us that a tzaddik gomer is a person who is b'nei aliyah. They belong to this very unique, very subtle kind of character of this group of people who effectively are all about transforming darkness into light. Not about getting rid of the darkness, not about generating light where previously there was darkness. They are about transforming the darkness itself, that it should become light. That's what we learned last time. So what could be higher than that? What could be greater than that? I mean, just imagine. That's what a person's dedicated their life to. That's why they cannot be satisfied with a world that is good for them. It's got to be a world that is good in the broader sense. And so they've got this agitation to transform the world and this very strong drive and commitment to make a difference. So what else? What else could you possibly expect of a tzaddik? You know, this is an incredible thing. Here's somebody who wants to completely revolutionize, change, transform, elevate our world. What could possibly be greater than that? Well, that's what we're going to find out this evening. We're going to discover that there is more to the tzaddik than even what meets the mind. I can't say what meets the eye because it meets the eye. I don't know. You might look at the person and say, big white beard. I don't know what we're going to see. What meets the eye? But what meets the mind, what we've already learnt about in terms of the tzaddik, the people who are b'nei aliyah, we're now going to discover a whole new level of understanding and appreciation of what this tzaddik is. And like I said right at the outset, we are going to be learning about things this evening that are very much over our heads, because we are nowhere close to the realm of the tzaddik. So things that are very much the life of the tzaddik are the kind of things that we don't even know how to read about in a book. So there's quite a bit of depth that you have to anticipate over here this evening. If you are using the book, we're on page 44, and we are close to the, we're at the top. We're on the first line. Still on the first line, the last word on the first line in the book of Tanya, and we'll stick it up over here on the screen so that everybody could see where we are on the screen. Where are we? There you go, the word V'oid. It's actually the last word on the page, the way it comes up on the screen there, V'oid. Okay, so we've given one interpretation of why tzaddikim who are at such a level that they are complete tzaddikim, why they should be called b'nei aliyah, people who are of this very elevated caliber. And now we're going to see another one, V'oid, and furthermore. And furthermore, Nikroim b'nei aliyah. The other reason why Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his colleagues, the great Kabbalists of that early period of Jewish history, why they refer, or he certainly refers to the perfect tzaddik as B'nai Aliyah, or as Ben Aliyah, somebody who is in this category of being so elevated and so unique, is for the following reason, right? Oid, another reason in addition to what we have already learned before. What is that? Because there's something about their proactive investment in doing what Hashem wants that is on a completely different level to the rest of us. So let's just understand that for a second. We know that the whole of Judaism is effectively two means, two channels, two approaches of how we develop a relationship with Hashem. And those two channels are called Sur Meira Va'asei Toiv. These are the words of King David. Sur Meira means to steer clear of anything which is toxic, which is inappropriate behavior. And Asei Tov is to be proactive about doing what we should do. So for example, not to eat food which is not kosher, that is Sur Meira. Staying away from something which is negative. Eating kosher food is Asei Tov. You're doing what Hashem said. Hashem said this is the Zoisa Behema Shetochelu. These are the animals that you should eat. So it's a positive mitzvah. that doesn't necessarily mean that every time that you eat, it's automatically a mitzvah just to eat. It's that if you're eating, it's a positive mitzvah to eat kosher food. So it's really valuable and important to know that. So up until now, the previous description, and in fact most of this chapter, was very much about the perfect tzaddik's attitude towards sur meirah. Remember, for us, sur meirah is getting away from temptation. That's what sur meirah means to us. So if we have a particular Achilles heel, and there's some area of our spirituality that we find that we're easily tempted by, that we're very susceptible to, sur meirah is to take the pragmatic steps to avoid that temptation. So a great example would be if there's something that we're not permitted to do on Shabbos, then the rabbis come along and they create a sur meirah, which is, so don't even touch those things, because that's going to keep you safe. And then you won't end up doing bad stuff. Now, most of the chapter spoke about how the tzaddik's interaction with the ra, with the negative in the world, is completely different. The tzaddik doesn't have this problem of, I might be tempted and so I have to put in precautions to ensure that I don't fail. He's not going to fail. Doesn't feel the temptation. There is no yetzer hara. There's no distraction. There's no draw towards those things. So what have we learned is the tzaddik, the perfect tzaddik's relationship with ra, rehabilitation. The tzaddik is the person who cannot tolerate the thought that there should be ra, negative, toxic spirituality in this world. Can't handle it. It disgusts him. It frustrates him. It hurts him. So therefore, his entire relationship with sur meirah is, I want a world that is going to be a holy world. A place that's going to be good for Hashem, not just good for me, because I'm protected and I don't have to worry about the temptations of the rest of people. The tzaddik can't afford to be smug and say, well, I don't know why you have these issues. You know, what's the big deal? It's like I heard somebody saying today, and believe it or not, was not even a Jewish person, saying, they were talking about Netflix, and they were saying, everybody who thinks, I don't know exactly what the words that they use, but basically anybody who is a thinking person will know that Netflix is not good for you. Okay? I'm not so sure. I know many, many thinking people who spend many, many hours watching Netflix. It's not so obvious. It's not so clear that these things are bad for us and, you know, soul destroying and we could use the time better. It's not natural that we feel that way. Tzadik Gomer, absolutely. The Tzadik Gomer does not walk past. I don't know if you've ever, okay, mate, I've got to be careful how I say this. Have you ever watched from people walk past the TV when it's on? Never seen this? So, of course, you're going to get people who, you know, they're not going to look. You're also going to get a whole lot of people who like, you know, because they're not used to it. So there's this allure. It's very similar to the Shabbos observant Jew who walks past the rugby that's on the TV screen on Shabbos afternoon. So you know that you're not supposed to watch the TV on Shabbos regardless of who it is who put it on. It's like very much not in the spirit of Shabbos and it's inappropriate and blah, blah, blah. And they walk very slowly. Yeah? We often joke over here in the community because many people, to get to shul on a Shabbos, they shortcut through the hotel across the street. So when there's good sports matches on, it's very useful to walk through the hotel across the street because they've got a very large screen that's playing the sport. Now the tzaddik doesn't have this issue. Tzadik doesn't walk past, you know, having to control himself so he doesn't do what he's not supposed to do. It holds no attraction. So his relationship to sur meirah is a relationship of, I don't have to guard myself against these temptations. So my relationship is going to be, what do I do to change the ra, to transform the darkness into light? But we can't only address a tzaddik from one perspective. We can't only define a tzaddik by what the tzaddik doesn't have to battle. Because isn't it fascinating? Don't you think it'd be interesting to understand when a tzaddik does mitzvahs, does it look and feel the same as us? In other words, let's say that you have two people sitting right next to each other. One is Yankel. You know Yankel? One is Yankel. And the other is Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses himself. They happen to be sitting next to each other at shul. Picture the scene. And they both come along to shul, and Yankel and Moshe both put on their tefillin. How many mitzvahs does Yankel get when he puts on tefillin? How many? See, I knew everybody would say 1. 2. Because the mitzvah of the hand tefillin is 1 mitzvah, and the mitzvah of the head tefillin is another mitzvah. He gets 2 mitzvahs. How many mitzvahs does Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest prophet who ever lived, Loi Kom Ke Moshe, nobody could rival Moshe. How many mitzvahs does he get when he puts on tefillin? 2. So if we're looking at the scoreboard, it's a tie. But don't you want to know what's in his mind when he puts on tefillin? I know what's in my mind when I put on tefillin. Nothing. Most of the time. That other day, there's something that they call they call it sleep inertia. Have you ever heard of sleep inertia? Sleep inertia is a theory that says that if a person wakes up, especially if they wake up in the middle of a sleep cycle, they need 10 to 15 minutes before they're fully conscious. So for that reason, many people come to shul. By the time they put on tefillin, they're not fully awake yet. So what's in their head? Nothing. Okay, let's say that you are conscious. So why do you put on tefillin? What do you feel? What do you want to achieve? When you put it on tefillin, what does it feel like? What does it do for you when you put on tefillin? I know, sorry, I'm excluding part of the audience by asking this question, but it's just to illustrate the point. What do you feel when you put on tefillin? Connection. What's the second one? Gratitude. You feel a sense of connection. You feel gratitude. Anybody ever feel religious when they put on tefillin? I think so. Feel fairly religious. I'm doing a religious ritual. Yeah, feels religious. So what does a tzaddik feel when he puts on tefillin? The same things? Does the tzaddik feel connection? Does the tzaddik feel religious? Does the tzaddik feel gratitude? Does the tzaddik feel belonging to the community? What goes through the tzaddik's mind when he puts on tefillin? So that's what we're going to be looking at now. V'oid, in addition to what we've described about how unique the tzaddik's attitude and approach to ra, to the negative in the world is, we're equally curious to understand what the tzaddik's experience of asay tov, of doing mitzvahs is. So, mipnei shegam avidosim bevechinas v'asay tov. The other reason why we call tzaddikim bnei aliyah, people who are at this extremely elevated level, is because what happens when they do a mitzvah, bekiyum haTorah, u'mitzvah seha, whatever it is that we proactively do to show our connection to Hashem, Torah study, doing a mitzvah is for a completely different motivation to us. So I'm going to ask you a question. You could choose to answer or not to answer. But why are you learning Tanya tonight? Why are you learning Tanya tonight? It's a good question, no? You've got to be careful what you answer, because if you don't have a good answer, then we may not see you next week. So, why are you learning Tanya? Why are you learning Tanya?
I was working
to learn how to connect to Hashem.
To learn how to connect to Hashem, right?
What we should be doing.
There we go. So why are we learning Tanya? Because we need a guide on how to develop ourselves and our relationship with Hashem. So Tanya's going to help me to be able to develop myself and have this meaningful relationship with Hashem. Okay, that's a really good motivation. What else? What do I say? Because you happen to be walking past and you remember that there was Tanya, you can't just sit down. Okay, that's also valid.
That's what Ryan said.
I'm not saying it's not bad. There you go. Here's another suggestion. Because Tanya is a guide to our souls. It's a guide to our souls. Okay, so therefore what? So why do I have to learn about my soul? I'm not...
Get in touch with our souls to get in touch with Hashem.
So we want to get in touch with our soul so we could get in touch with Hashem. Okay? What else? Give me any other suggestions why somebody would learn Tanya. Because it's the right thing to do. Because it's the right thing to do. That's a good one. Because it's the right thing to do. Somebody's throwing this back in my face and saying that it's a guide to our souls because that's what I put in the advert for Tanya. Is that it's a guide to our souls. What I'm really trying to get at is this. At the end of the day, if we're really honest, the reason every single one of us is here, except maybe Daniela, who said it's because it's the right thing to do. But if we really want to be honest, you know why we're here? Because we gain from the experience. We gain from the experience. What we gain is different for different people. Maybe I just really enjoy having the opportunity to share the teachings of Hasidus with other people. So what does that mean? I'm gaining out of this. I love it. I love doing that. I love being able to share these massive, beautiful principles with other people. Somebody else comes along. Why? Nobody wants to say it because anybody who's learned a little bit of Tanya is sensitive to these things. Nobody says, I'm here at the Tanya Shir because I'm trying to secure a better position in Gan Eden. But maybe that's part of the motivation. If I do what Hashem wants, then it's probably going to work in my favor, and I'll land up where I should be in the next one, right? Because we enjoy it, exactly. Because we enjoy it. So, what's the common thread through all of our motivations around the things that we do as Jewish people, the Torah that we learn, the mitzvahs that we do? By and large, self-interest. I know it's in my interest. I know I'm going to gain from it. I know it's the right thing to do, and I'm the type of person who likes to do the right thing. It's tradition. So if you talk about mitzvahs for it, right? It's tradition. So typically, the motivations for why we are asay tov, doing positively what Hashem wants, is typically because we see a value for ourselves. Typically. Okay, so Kati says, can you do it lishma? Okay, we'll talk about that. I don't know. Lishma meaning for absolutely altruistic purpose. I'm not even sure that we know what lishma means to be able to define whether we're doing it lishma or not. But it is definitely fair to say that the vast majority of us, our engagement in proactive Judaism is because we see a value, we see a benefit to us. Now, in the same way as we see the negative in the world as a threat to us, so we have to protect ourselves from that threat, and the tzaddik doesn't see it as a threat, similarly, we have to anticipate that we see Judaism as a value to us, and the tzaddik doesn't see it that way. That doesn't mean the tzaddik does not see value in the Torah and mitzvahs. But this point of distinction over here is that tzaddik does not see it as value to self. Very interesting. And yes, so Gary is saying it's the reason that we were created. Of course, everybody was created to come to the Tanya show. The question is why the other 12.5 million or however many Jews in the world haven't worked this out yet. Or perhaps we've just been very self-interested and we haven't shared the Zoom link with everybody else. I don't know why. I mean, the place should be teeming with people to learn Tanya because that's why we were created, which is true. And something along those lines is what goes through the mind of the Tzadik Gomer, except that it's really not the way that we would expect it. So let's read on. So, also, the way that they serve Hashem in a positive, proactive way by studying Torah and fulfilling the mitzvahs, etc., who letzorech gavoya is for a higher purpose. Remember, we're calling the perfect Tzadik Ben Aliyah, somebody who's at a very elevated state. So, you could be very elevated and therefore you're not affected by the stuff of this world. Like, for example, I think I used this example before. If somebody is sitting in traffic, that affects them, right? If you're stuck in a traffic jam, it affects you. But if somebody's in the International Space Station, all the traffic in the world is completely irrelevant because you're at a higher altitude, so the things that bother people at a lower altitude don't bother you. So Bnei Aliyah, because the tzaddikim are so incredibly elevated, therefore they are not challenged or sucked into the same temptation that we are. By the same token, Bnei Aliyah, they're so much spiritually advanced, they are at a higher spiritual state to what we are. Therefore, what drives and motivates their mitzvahs is far higher than what we motivate our mitzvahs with. So whatever it is that we put on this list, and if we got all our friends and family together, we could have expanded this list further, whatever motivation we might use, even when a person says, that's why I was created, there's a certain sense in that which says, and therefore I am responsible to live up to the purpose for which I was created, and there's an element of guilt if I don't, so there's a motivation that's self-interested. I need to feel my life is worthwhile. I need to feel I'm not wasting my time. So even there, it's accurate, it's the reason we were created, but saying that still has this element of self-interest in it. The tzaddik is tzorech gavoya. The entire motivation and drive behind the tzaddik's Jewish involvement is for a higher purpose than the purposes that we typically identify. And what's interesting about this is when somebody is flying at that altitude, we can't even see where they are, let alone understand it. And when something comes into our lives that we can't see and understand, then what we usually just do is either dismiss it as impossible or project our reality onto it, which means we don't really see what it is. And that's typically what people do. So You might know somebody, for example, who is a very even-tempered, optimistic, healthy, I'm saying mentally healthy, joyous person. So what does the average person say when they meet somebody who's just always in a good, upbeat, confident mood? What does the average person say? You obviously don't understand the problem. Because we project. For us, it is so unthinkable that somebody could live without the persistent stress that swallows up so much of our time and energy. So when we meet such a person, we just assume, okay, they probably just don't appreciate what's going on. When we experience a tzaddik or learn about a tzaddik, the first thing he wants us to know is that they are b'nei aliyah. They're not living on the same plateau that we are. So therefore, what we see and identify about them, we have to have the humility to acknowledge is not what we expect, not what we think. So why do you do Torah mitzvahs? I do Torah mitzvahs for X and Y reasons. So without even thinking it through, I'm automatically projecting that you probably do the same. So if I'm doing Torah mitzvahs because it makes my life richer and because it makes me more calm and because it keeps me focused and because I want to get points for the world to come, then I naturally assume that anybody else is being from must be doing so for the same reasons. Why these similar reasons? Enter the tzaddik as l'tzorech gavoya. The tzaddik is motivated by something which is a higher purpose, and we use the words higher purpose so easily and glibly that we don't necessarily actually stop to think what a higher purpose actually means. So here he's going to tell us what it actually means. So the first stage, which will feel a little bit familiar to us, is that the motivation of the perfect tzaddik is to rise higher and higher to the highest of levels. That's relatable. I think any one of us could hope that through our engagement in this spiritual development process called Judaism, that we could hope it's going to take us higher and higher and higher. Right? I think any one of us would consider that a worthwhile motivation and a worthwhile aspiration. So now, we said that the value of learning Torah and the value of doing mitzvahs is to allow us to connect to Hashem. Valid. That's absolutely true. My question then was, not that I asked this question, but the question then is, why? Why do I need to connect to Hashem? It's a funny question, yeah? Rabbi, what do you mean? Why do I need to connect to Hashem? Isn't that what Judaism is all about? Okay, why? Why do I need to connect to Hashem? In other words, I'm not asking philosophically, why is it that Hashem would want us to connect with Him? I'm asking for a person, what drives me to want to commit to connect to Hashem? What's going to happen in my life if I connect to Hashem? Why is this a marketable entity? To connect to Hashem. I don't know. What's going to happen if I connect to Hashem? What was Brochus. There you go. So this is valid, right? A person knows that if I have a meaningful connection to Hashem, I can anticipate that there will be meaningful flow from Hashem into my life. I'll, please God, have a good income. I'll have good health. I'll have a happy family. I'll live in a place that they'll be safe. That's what goes through our minds. So what's connection? Connection is for whose sake? For whose benefit? Me. It's for my benefit. And not only is that for my benefit, again, it's absolutely valid that if we connect to Hashem, we connect to Brocha. It's true. Just because something is true doesn't mean it is the ultimate state that we should live with. So can you think of a reason, can you think of a reason why to connect to Hashem that's not just to get Brochas? Sorry,
Rabbi. It's more to make yourself a kli, a vessel, so that the brochas can come through you, and that can only happen if you are connected to Hashem.
Okay, valid. So you're saying that a person who's connected to Hashem becomes a worthy conduit for divine energy to flow into this world, and therefore a worthy conduit to be able to receive and even to share brocha. which isn't altogether different from saying that the reason we want to connect to Hashem is in order to have bracha in our lives. Because again, it still comes back to, so what's in it for me? Okay, so Gary's saying for the Shekhinah, but I'm not sure what you mean. Maybe you can just flesh that out a little bit. When we connect to Hashem, we can elevate the world around us. Okay, so that's maybe a little bit more altruistic. It's not just about me. It's not just about me that I'm going to gain brachas by having a connection to Hashem, but I'll then be able to direct bracha to the world. So, sorry to say this. You'll excuse me saying this. But has anybody over here ever wished, and maybe you've outgrown it, but have you ever wished that you'd win the lottery? Yeah? Yeah, okay. So what happens when a Jewish person buys a lottery ticket? I don't know how it is in any other religion or culture because I've never interviewed them. But when a Jewish person buys the lottery, what do? After buying the lottery, what do?
God help me win the ticket.
They explain to Hashem why it would be a good thing for them to win. Right? That's what it's going to do. Hashem, if I win the lottery, I'm giving 50% to tzedakah. 50% to tzedakah. Right? Okay. Hashem needs me. So I'm going to win 100 million. I'm going to give 50 million. Without me, Hashem could not distribute 50 million tzedakah in this world. What do you mean? He's Ein Sof. He is infinite. Hashem can do anything. He's Kol Yochol. He has infinite resources. He needs me to win the lottery so those people can get tzedakah. What kind of nonsense is that? If Hashem wants them to have money, he'll put the money straight into their bank account. As they used to say in the old insurance ad, cut out the middleman. If the reason that I need to connect to Hashem is in order that there'll be an elevation of the world, it might be technically true that when I connect to Hashem, I help to elevate the world. But it doesn't really explain why we need this. Hashem could skip right over us, do this Pesach kind of trick, skip right over us, and send all the brachas to the world. Elevate the world. Why do I need to connect to Hashem?
Isn't it a natural
Right?
extension of just being?
It's a natural extension of being what? To want to have a connection to Hashem.
Yeah, but I mean, we're a part of each other.
Oh, okay, so you're saying something a little differently to what I thought. So I thought what you were saying is it's like just naturally part of the human condition that you want to connect to Hashem. You're saying something a little bit more than that. It's naturally part of the soul's condition. Because the soul is, as we learned in chapter 2, a part of Hashem, and there's been some level of separation, so now the soul wants to come back. This is very profound, and I'm going to park it for a second just to come back to one or two other comments over here, and then we'll come back to that. So Gary was saying that the Shekhinah means to be able to create a dwelling place for Hashem on earth, which is true, also profound, so we're going to maybe marry the two. So here's another one. I can't understand the world or why things happen the way they do. So you want to have a connection to Hashem in order to know that we're in good hands, basically. We're in good hands. It's okay. Even if I can't work it out, at least we're okay. And if I don't have that connection to Hashem, then I can't really believe that. It's just lip service. Whereas if I have the connection, at least, okay, Baruch Hashem. It's not so bad. Because there's a plan, which is true. It's valid. So going back to this principle of having been part of Hashem and now not feeling part of Hashem, and therefore having this inner drive to want to reconnect. So there's a good metaphor for this, which is the metaphor of marriage. We know that marriage is very frequently used as a metaphor for Hashem and the Jewish people, so it's a good metaphor for us to use. And in the metaphor of marriage, of course, in the metaphor of marriage, the irony of marriage is, the Gemara tells us that by nature, it is much more common for women to want to marry than for men to want to marry. Which effectively means this, that girls from a very young age are already dressing up as brides and planning their weddings and talking about getting married, and men try and avoid it at all costs. And eventually, at some point, they probably are given an ultimatum, at which, okay, fine. Within the next 6 months, I'm going to propose, failing, of course, any financial crisis or COVID or political unrest or whatever the case is. But please God, Why is that ironic? Because the Gemara also tells us that the responsibility to marry is the man's responsibility, and that he has to put in the effort to find his partner as a person would put in the effort to find something very valuable that they lost. So then the question is, what's the valuable thing that you've lost that you're going to find when you discover the woman of your dreams? What's this thing that you've lost? So what does the Gemara say? What have you lost? Surely you can work this out. What have you lost? The other half, or as some people like to call it, the rib.
Your soulmate.
Right? The other part, the other half, right? So it's your soulmate, it's the physical manifestation. Why is that? Because right at the beginning of the Torah, and this is where the rib myth has to go straight out of the window, right at the beginning of the Torah, when it describes for us the very first human being, this is what it says. Vayivra Elokim es ha'adam b'tzalmoi. You heard this the other morning, by the way. Vayivra Elokim es ha'adam b'tzalmoi. That Hashem created the man, not man as in masculine, but the man as in the genus of humans, the Homo sapien. B'tzalmoi, in his image, the divine image. B'tzelem Elokim bara oisoi, in the image of God, He created him. We know that words in nouns and even verbs in Hebrew are gender specific. So He created him. Okay, again, how does it go? That it says, and Hashem created the man. B'tzalmoi, in his image. In the image of Hashem, He created him. We're still in the same sentence, where the Torah now suddenly changes mid-sentence and says, Zachar unekeva bara oisam. Male and female, He created them. So is the subject of this sentence him or them? It's confusing. If you would be using Grammarly, it would tell you that there is a textual inconsistency in your sentence. Because you started off talking about him, and now you're talking about them, and that doesn't work. Based on this, the Gemara tells us that Hashem actually created the first human being as what is called du partzufin. A partzuf is an image, a full image of the human being. Even though partzuf could also mean your face, it means a full like a full three-dimensional image. Du partzufin is duo, right? A dual being. And the Gemara goes on to describe that you had male and female fused into a single organism back to back. Therefore, Ha'adam, the original paragon human being, is Zachar Unekeva, male and female. What happens next? Hashem says, Loi toiv heyois ha'adam, same word, levadoi. It is no good for the man to be alone, therefore, I'm going to make him a helpmate who will also stand against him. Meaning to say that the most important person who will give us the most value in our self-growth and development is very often going to push back against us. That's the nature of how Hashem created it. So how did He make this helpmate? So Hashem anesthetizes Adam, and then it says, Vayikach es hatzela. He took out the tzela, which people misinterpret as a rib, but actually means the entire side, because there were two partzufim fused by the spine. So He took the one side off, and He built it up into a woman. Okay? And then, ever since then, the Gemara says, man is looking for that missing part. So the male has to go looking for this missing part. Now, the very obvious question is, there is none of that drama in the creation of goats or elephants. There's none of that drama. How did Hashem make any other species of creature, bird, fish, fowl, animal? How did Hashem make them? Simple. He just produced a whole bunch of them. So immediately, on the first few minutes after Hashem created buffaloes, there was a herd of buffaloes and a pride of lions, maybe many prides of lions, many herds of buffaloes. The human being is this great drama. Ha-adam, it's this mixture, male, female, all woven into one that has to then be separated, and for the rest of your life you feel that something's missing until you go and you discover it. Or as they say, before a man is married, he is only half a man, and then once he marries, he is finished. So why all this drama? Why this whole convoluted way to make a human being? What's the clue? No? You tell me. In the verse that I quoted to you, where is the clue as to why this is unique? What words did the Torah say about the original human being that gives us the clue why it's such a sophisticated procedure? What were the words? There's a huge clue in the pasuk. What's the clue? What's the clue? Something that is only said about humans and not about any other creature.
B'Tselem Elokim.
Exactly. But Tzelem Elokim, in the image of God. That is critical information for us. Because that's telling you that whatever we're learning metaphorically in the story of Adam and Eve and every male and female through the rest of history as a result is there to help us appreciate the relationship between us and Hashem. But Tzelem Elokim, our design reflects the nature of the divine. So in the story of the human, there is Ha'adam. The dominant feature is the male feature. Therefore, the name for the entire organism is actually a male name. And then there's the female who's the Azer. She's there to assist, which kind of implies that it's almost like a secondary role, a supportive role. And that's us and Hashem. Hashem is the alpha entity. Ha'adam, the being, the absolute. And we are, so to speak, in a sense, detached to play a supportive role. A supportive role is an interesting concept, because how does an infinite being require support? Okay, interesting concept, part of what we'll learn through the course of this chapter. It's a fascinating concept, right? So what happens? What happens is the responsibility to reunite is whose responsibility? The man. But who from the youngest age dreams one day I'm going to be able to get married? Who? The little girl who becomes a young lady, who becomes a woman. Who has this inner drive? This is your point, right? Who has this inner drive that I've got to find a way to connect? We do. Even if we're not conscious of it. So yes, the girl is conscious of the fact that she wants to wear a wedding dress. But we're not necessarily conscious, and yet it is such a powerful drive, and it keeps pulling us back even when we don't realize it, we don't think about it, we don't sometimes even want it, and it keeps schlepping us back to have that connection. What happens when a person has an element in their life that is so central, so fundamental, so big, so all-consuming? What happens one day when you eventually get there? The girl is now standing under her chuppah after having dreamt about this for 20 years. She's now standing under her chuppah. What happens now? How does she feel?
Emotion.
Deep emotion. This huge sense of completeness, this huge this awareness of the promise and the potential of the future. It's such a full feeling. We won't talk about how the guy feels. But it's such a full feeling because there's been so many years of wishing for this to happen. King David HaMelech describes something about our relationship with Hashem, which is similar to this when he says in Tehillim, Tzomma lecha nafshi. We quoted this already in chapter 7. Tzomma lecha nafshi. My soul thirsts for you, Hashem. It's such an apt metaphor for when you really need something in your life. Because thirsty is very compelling. If a person says, I'm really thirsty, you say, okay, we'll deal with it tomorrow. I can't deal with it tomorrow. I'm thirsty. This has to be now. There's an urgency to it. Tzomma nafshi. He says in two different places. Tzomma nafshi le'elokim. My soul thirsts for Hashem. What's he describing? He's describing this feeling. He's describing this feeling that the wife wants, the girl wants to get married. The neshama wants to connect to Hashem. It's this deep sense of lack that has to be filled. So when it's eventually filled, when you reach that point, when you stand under that chuppah, when you have that relationship, what does it feel like? It is so life-altering. It is so fulfilling. Now, if we were driven to do Torah and mitzvahs on that basis, because we have this thirst and this yearning for Hashem, and we know that this is what's going to satisfy it. That's why one of the reasons that Torah is compared to water, because it's going to satisfy this thirst that I have, that I keep trying to plug up with experiences and fancy foods and brand label clothing and gadgets and whatever, and I just can never fill that void, because at the end of the day I'm thirsty. And playing a video game is not going to take away the thirst. And hanging out with my friends is not going to take away the thirst. So I'm thirsty. Imagine we were driven by that. I think that everybody would acknowledge that is actually a profound spiritual motivation. Says the Alter Rebbe, Veloi kedei ledofka bo yisborech belvad leravois tzimoi nafsho matzmei al Hashem. The perfect tzaddik is motivated to rise. What did he say? Maila, maila adrum hamailos. Higher and higher till the highest heights, not to satisfy his personal thirst. Personal spiritual thirst is a very meaningful, powerful, profound experience. The perfect tzaddik is not motivated by it. He's higher than that. Can you imagine? For the rest of us, we're wishing that would be our driver. That I have this thirst, this yearning for Hashem, and I've got to actually satisfy it. How many of us live with a conscious yearning of Hashem? Yeah, occasionally we have moments. We have a ne'ilah where we get, at the end of Yom Kippur, we've built ourselves to a crescendo, so we feel this thing. Maybe there's something happening in our lives that's very profound. Maybe something's happening in the world that really shakes us up. But how much of the time are we living with a thirst for Hashem? So to us, to reach a stage of thirsting for Hashem is an aspiration. For the perfect tzaddik, that's not even the beginning of their motivation. B'nai Aliyah, they're at a completely different level, totally beyond that. So for the rest of us, Kamosha Kosov, the prophet Yeshaya tells us, Hoi kol tzomei lechu lemayim, those who are thirsty, go to water. And later on, Kamosha Kosov Makim Acher, later on in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe is going to unpack this particular line. Those who are thirsty go to water. Because effectively it's saying, it sounds like so obvious. If you're thirsty, obviously you go to water. What else should you be doing? But his message really is, the prophet Yeshaya's message is, most people who are thirsty spiritually don't go to water. They go to everything else under the sun, believing that somehow it will shortcut the quenching of their thirst. And there is no other way to quench the thirst other than water. There is no other way to quench that desire that we have to connect to Hashem other than to follow the things that Hashem gave us in order to be able to connect. So for the rest of us, having this thirst, this yearning, this urgent need to be able to have a connection to Hashem is aspirational. It would be an amazing level for us to achieve. For the Tzadik Gomer, that's not even beginning. That's not what motivates him. That's not what drives him. He doesn't need to fix a hole in his heart. He doesn't need to satisfy himself that I now have a relationship with Hashem and I feel so enriched because of it. It's not his motivation. So what is his motivation? I don't know. We'll see you next week.